Hey everyone, Poindexter here. Interceptor Ace, from designer Gregory M. Smith and published by Compass Games, has recently been released. It's a solitaire war game based on the designs of Greg Smith's Night Fighter Ace and the Hunters, German U-boats at war. In this game, you, the player, are a pilot in the German Air Force in World War II. You will fly multiple sorties from different locations all across Western Europe and Germany, intercepting American bomber raids and attempting to shoot down as many B-17s and B-24 heavy bombers as possible. As the game progresses, your pilot will begin encountering more and more Allied escort fighters, such as P-47s, P-51s, and P-38s, as well as British Spitfires. Tangling with these escorts will make your missions that much more dangerous. The game takes place from March 1943 until February 1944. The Luftwaffe was at its peak effectiveness against American bombing raids during this time. Though don't mistake that to mean the Germans can simply run roughshod over the Allied bombers. Early in the campaign, most American raids are unescorted, giving your pilot better odds of survival. However, this temporary advantage doesn't make shooting down a bomber any easier. American bombers fly in tight combat formations, and their defensive fire is potentially deadly because of it. While a lot of games have you tally up victory points at the end of a campaign to see how well you performed, Interceptor Ace does away with that. The goal of this game is simple: survive as long as possible. It's not as easy as it seems, and there's a good chance you won't. So let's go over what comes with the game, and I'll throw in a little information while we go. Interceptor Ace comes with one counter sheet, 15 aircraft display mats, 4 player aid cards, a combat display map, 2 bomber target mats, 1 pilot awards display mat, an air operations mat, 8 ACE pilot cards, 60 combat cards, a rulebook, log sheet, and 2 6-sided dice, 1 10-sided die, and 1 20-sided die. Compared to many other solitaire games, physically, Interceptor Ace has a smaller tabletop footprint, which can be a good thing, as it doesn't take long to set up and take down. However, don't mistake Interceptor Ace's smaller footprint to mean that there's not much to the game. The mechanics of the game are set up so that the choices you do have can be tough ones, and in some cases, making the wrong choice is deadly for your pilot, whether you are killed outright or take so much damage that your crash landing could take you out of the war for good. The game has a very compelling risk-reward factor that builds a narrative around the exploits of your pilot, or crew if you are flying a twin-engine heavy fighter with a rear gunner. As the months drag on, your pilot will likely survive more than a few harrowing missions, botched intercepts where nothing happens at all, surprise encounters with American escort fighters, wounds, and parachuting out of a burning fighter plane. Hopefully it doesn't explode while you are in it. That is a career ender. First, the operations map. It is here that you place your combat cards and indicate the weather for the current sortie. It also has quite a few quick reference rules scattered around. The colored squares on the map indicate the areas, or zones as the game calls them, that your pilot can be stationed during the course of the game. Under certain circumstances, you can transfer from one zone to another, but more on that later. Other than being a regional frame of reference, this map is not used much during gameplay. Next is the aircraft display mat. This mat has a lot of information and is used heavily during the game. However, everything is laid out in an uncluttered and understandable manner. This aircraft is only one of 29 potential fighters, or versions of fighters, you can fly during the course of your career. In the upper part of the mat, we see the make of the current aircraft we're flying, a space for the current zone we are flying out of, another for our current base or airfield, and one for the current fighter unit we are flying in. These spaces are simply for reference and not utilized during combat. Some fighters are available at the start of the game, as indicated for this particular FW-190, but some are not. Those fighters can be purchased when they become available, if your pilot has the prestige to do so. In this example, your pilot will need 3 prestige points to fly the FW-190 A5R6. The speed of the aircraft is indicated here, and is used when in combat with Allied escort fighters. And we have a side view of the aircraft we are currently flying. Just below this area is the sortie, or endurance section. This area is used to track your interceptor's path toward the bomber stream. You start a sortie in the hangar. After rolling dice for the target area the bombers will be attacking, you will take off and move along the track to their location and begin combat. The gray boxes here indicate areas beyond your fighter's range limit. For example, if we were based in the French zone and a bomber attack was rolled for Bremen, we would not be able to intercept the force since Bremen is grayed out, which means it is beyond the range of our fighter. Interceptor ACE uses this track method as a way of abstracting fuel consumption and regional range limitations. By doing so, the game retains a sense of realism, but plays much faster, as you are not required to track things such as fuel stats and range limits, since the endurance track does it all for you, so you can concentrate on quickly getting to the action. Another chart that we will be using quite often is the bomber target chart. This chart has images of the 2 main bombers you will be encountering in your missions, the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-24 Liberator. The boxes underneath the 2 bombers are damage trackers, which will indicate damage accumulated by your attack run. In the middle area is the bomber combat track. This area is used to track the location of your fighter in relation to the target. Generally, most attacks against bombers begin at long range, then work their way up to medium range, then close range. As you close into the target, your accuracy increases by 1 extra hit. However, the bomber's defensive fire becomes more accurate as well, even more so if the bomber is in formation, which increases its chances to hit. As your fighter is not nearly as robust as an American heavy bomber, it cannot take too many hits before it becomes incapacitated or completely destroyed. As many actual German fighter pilots that fought during the war reported, attacking an American bomber formation was a terrifying venture, and one that many German pilots greatly feared. Therefore, the Germans came up with ways of attempting to break up these tight formations so they could be dealt with more easily. One method that is utilized in Interceptor ACE are rocket attacks. This box here indicates that a fighter carrying the Wurfgefreiter 21 rockets can attack a target at a range beyond the defensive fire of the bombers. If the rocket attack is successful, the bomber could be knocked out of formation, and therefore becomes a little easier to attack. However, the rocket pods slung under the wings of your fighter affect its performance, so if you happen to be unlucky enough to encounter Allied escort fighters before you attack your bomber, they will begin combat with a significant performance advantage. On the right side, we have the weapons suite section, which tracks your ammunition. For game purposes, all guns fire at the same time. You cannot choose which set of weapons to fire. The numbers here indicate the total firepower for that weapon. You add these numbers together, as long as you have ammo and the gun has not been knocked out, and refer to the number range on the combat card to discover how many hits you have caused. You can do several random hits, a group hit, which is a particular section of the target, such as a wing or the airframe, or, if you are extremely lucky, you will destroy the target completely. A lucky hit. At the bottom of the mat is your fighter's damage track, which, compared to the bombers you will be going up against, has far fewer spaces, which makes it more fragile. This block here keeps track of your wingman's status, and this block tracks any wounds your pilot is currently suffering from. Wounds can be either light, critical, or KIA. The next chart is the fighter target chart, which is used to resolve dogfights between your fighter and Allied escorts. All 4 models of Allied fighter craft are represented, with their respective damage boxes underneath. In the middle, you will place counters representing your aircraft and that of the Allied escort. Borrowing from the Down in Flames card game of aerial combat, the position of the counters indicates who is in the superior position to fire at the other. Most encounters begin head-on, indicated by both counters facing each other. Both fighters can fire at each other in this state, but this position could change depending on the player and sometimes the combat cards that are drawn. Other positions include advantaged, where the player can fire but the Allied escort cannot, and tailing, which is the superior position for the player and the one that usually causes the most damage. The opposite positions are also possible, with the player being disadvantaged, in which he cannot fire, and tailed, which is the worst position to be in. Near the bottom, we see the initiative chart. Remember those speed numbers we talked about earlier? Well, here's where they come into play. A 6-sided die roll for each aircraft is added to the speed numbers of the aircraft involved. The difference between those 2 numbers is used to determine if there has been a position change. If so, the new positions are applied and the combat continues. Or not, if you are able to break off or the escort is able to get away. It's a simplified and quick way of resolving dogfights, but, like other things in this game, it's no less exciting, and often quite intense. Finally, we have the pilot and crew status card. This chart is used to track your pilot's awards, skills, prestige, experience, and promotions. It also tracks the experience of your wingman, and if you're flying a twin-engine fighter, those of the rear gunner. Awards, medals, and promotions give you prestige points, which are used for various game-related choices, such as upgrading your aircraft to a newer model, getting a new type of fighter, or getting a transfer to another fighter group. Experience points are used to purchase skills that help give your pilot an edge in combat. For every 4 sorties, or missions, 1 experience point is earned. The same is also true for your wingman and crew. They will gain an experience point for every 4 sorties flown, even if they were never in combat. It takes time, but having a skilled wingman can be a great asset as the game progresses, though you are under no obligation to use one if you don't want to. The choice is yours. There are also a handful of player cards for use in the game, with various charts that will be used to facilitate play. They are generally laid out well and aren't too much of a problem to locate when you need them. There is another optional chart in the box that I didn't go over, which is a modified version of the bomber combat track, which allows you to choose a position to launch your attack of the bomber. This chart gives a little more choice and depth to your attack run, but for the purposes of this gameplay, we will not use it, as I will be showing the basic game only. Also, there are 8 German ace cards, which give you the option to assume the role of some of Germany's greatest fighter aces and attempt to see them through a campaign, or attempt to better their real-life results. For the purpose of this particular playthrough, we will not be using them, but I wanted to point them out as they are part of the game. And that is a general overview of Interceptor Ace, Daylight Air Defense over Germany. Next time, we will start our first mission by creating a pilot and starting a career defending the skies of Germany against Allied bombing raids. Until that time, thanks for watching, and we'll talk again soon.